But what I find is in the space, because of how many views did that video get versus, hey, how many true connections did that video build or forge, that we're kind of getting into a very messy and loud space, especially with the rise of AI. It's just getting louder and louder and harder for small businesses, especially small businesses who are not equipped with team or resources to pour into their digital presence. It's just getting harder to cut through the noise.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, filled with marketing and leadership tips on launching and growing your business with your host, Deanne Mora.
Today on the podcast, we're diving into a critical yet often overlooked topic, the importance of human connection in this rapidly changing AI landscape. My guest is Robin Nathaniel, a TEDx speaker whose talk, Why You Should Reconsider Your Last Words to Someone, emphasized the power of mindful communication. He's also the author of Social Media Sync, a strategist who's collaborated with brands like Diesel, NBC Sports, and vidIQ. He's a podcast host and Mini Money Major Award winner. Robin is someone who constantly reminds us, in a world flooded with auto-generated nonsense, the most disruptive thing you can be is human. So whether you're building a brand, leading a team, or aiming for more authenticity in your digital presence, this conversation is for you. Robin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on, Diane. And I love that intro. That was spot on, textbook. It was so good.
Awesome. We tried. Well, listen, I had a chance to watch your powerful TEDx talk, and it really struck me. It really resonated with me. And your topic was about last words. So tell me, what stirred that message, and how does it tie into the broader digital connection crisis?
Yep. So I'll start by saying it wasn't my initial topic for my talk. I was pitching a whole different talk at the time. In all honesty, I was a bit of an opportunist. I was like, I'm going to get on this stage. I'm going to get more clients. I'm going to grow my business. It's going to be great. Right. And then I pitched my talk to the organizer, and he was like, nah, that's not it. It was an okay idea and concept, but it wasn't the talk. So we kept doing this exercise, and his name is Daryl Stinson. Big shout out to him. He's a TEDx coach. So he coaches people on how to get on the stage and also how to execute once they're on stage. So he was like just picking me apart. And in our conversation, he asked me to tell him my story. And I started with, well, I started my career. And he's like, not your career, your story. Start with Little Robin. And that's where it really began. Me kind of opening up about things in my life that maybe aren't fun to talk about, what I call the mud on my boots, things that in some ways were embarrassing for me to speak about for many years. And I never really spoke about publicly. And once I opened up to him about my past and my story, that's where the talk was created. And really the motivation behind it, where I started with this opportunist mindset, changed to a service mindset, where I was looking at my talk as an opportunity to take my pain, to take my negative experiences, to take my trauma, put it into a talk, serve it up to hopefully have people not make the same mistakes that I had made.
Now, I do want everyone to go and listen to your talk, but maybe if you could kind of set the context for us and just give us a few of the highlights, because I think that idea of last words is really powerful, and knowing that anytime you walk away from someone, what if those are your last words? And what does that mean? How did you come to that mindset?
Yeah. So really the talk is broken down really into three big sections. The first section is a story about my mother and our last interaction. And then the next segment is about my brother and our last interaction. And the final one is where I introduce my sync method and how people can use that to end conversations the right way. So
Mm.
I'll share a quick story, a quick version of the story of my brother. So my brother served 20 years in prison, right? And that was a huge part of his identity. He went to prison at 16 years old in New York City, which for anybody who knows about the prison system in New York State, it's no joke. It's really a tough, violent, volatile environment for anyone, especially a 16-year-old child, right? So he grew up in prison as an adult for 20 years, and then he was released. And when he was released, he was deported to Trinidad and Tobago to start his life. There were times when I would talk to my brother where he told me, and it kind of like it really pulls at my heartstrings. He told me sometimes he wishes he was back in jail because it was easier, because he had been so, programmed for that lifestyle. Being free and having to like work and get a job was totally foreign to him. Fast forward a couple of years later, he kind of got his stuff together. He was a taxi driver. He also did some odd jobs in construction, and then he fell ill. He was on his essentially what would become his deathbed for a couple of months, and then he got better. All the time he was on the phone, Diane, with me, talking, staying motivated. He sound positive, and then he finally told me, "Hey, I'm going home today." When he said that, I felt like it was all good. We were in the clear. So I took my foot off the pedal in terms of being as active to keep him motivated, and then he sent me a voice note, which he often did. I remember I was washing dishes or, doing something in the kitchen. I looked over like you do sometimes. You see an alert. Oh, I'll respond to it later. No worries. Time goes by and I forgot about the message. A few days later, my father called me. He told me to sit down, Robin. I sat down and he told me that my brother Kevin had passed away.
Oh my gosh.
I went back to check the voicemail that I knew was sitting there that I hadn't listened to. And his last words to me were, "I got fluid in my lung. I got fluid in my stomach. I'm going back to the hospital."
Oh,
So for me, and again, that's a shortened version of the story. That triggered something in me to make sure that, especially for the people that matter in my life, that I prioritize those conversations, beginning, middle, and ending, but especially the ending, because now I'll never get to respond back to him. I'll never get to write him a note. I'll never get to leave him a voice note. I'll never get to call him and check in and say, "Hey, are you going back to the hospital?" to give him any kind of input. So that's a quick version of the story, and I encourage anyone who has someone they like in their life that they've been meaning to reach out to watch the talk.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. But when you tell that story, it just really resonates because how many of us have done it, right? You see that call that comes up and you just, you let it go past because you don't appreciate the urgency of it and the importance of that connection because you think that connection is always going to be there, which is just absolutely heartbreaking. And I know on LinkedIn, you've also written that, anytime that you see leaders chasing views over connection, that it just breaks your heart. So obviously that this is, these early experiences have clearly shaped you and your outlook. So how do you, what do you mean by that? What are the deeper layers that you see in that behavior?
Yep. So I'll start by saying my views, frameworks, ideas, and philosophies around social media and digital media conflicts with a lot of what's out there. I'll start by saying that. So there are many leaders in the space, gurus in the space, that have different opinions. And I believe many of my frameworks, especially in my book, are a bit radical compared to some of those folks. So when it comes to vanity metrics, for most companies, right? Most companies are viewing vanity metrics as a part of a journey towards whatever the conversion is that they're trying to make it to, right? Some do it better than others. For those who are struggling with it, what they do is they look to those beacons of hope who might be a guru saying like, "Hey, here's the hack. Post at this time, use this hook and voila," right? And that's kind of what the way the industry feels and looks to me, which is a little icky and a little, I guess, off-putting to me because I've been doing social media for 20 years, Diane, right? When the first platforms we had was 6 Degrees, Friendster, and MySpace, that's when I was forging out a path for my career, even though I didn't know it would be a career. I just knew that I had the ability to use a device. In that time, it was a computer to connect with a person on this other side of the world and to create some kind of connection that would lead to a result or a conversion. And that's simply what it is. But what I find is in the space, because of how many views did that video get versus, hey, how many true connections did that video build or forge, that we're kind of getting into a very messy and loud space, especially with the rise of AI. It's just getting louder and harder for small businesses, especially small businesses who are not equipped with team or resources to pour into their digital presence. It's just getting harder to cut through the noise. So simply put, I would I would say that the remedy for all of it is to start at the beginning to figure out what is the intention behind us creating our social media strategy or our social media content, and how is it going to impact and serve the people that we're trying to reach.
Yeah, I mean, social media is social by definition, right? There's humans on the other end, and yet, somehow we have to balance being slaves to the almighty algorithm and then actually making those human connections. So, what's your take on how we do that from a social media perspective?
So I think my sync method is a good place to start. Can I give you a quick and
Yeah,
dirty breakdown of the
let's
sync
walk
method?
through that.
S-
Absolutely.
So the sync method is a framework that really I created while writing my talk, my TEDx talk. But in February of 2025, I did an interview with a gentleman named David Eady, and man, he Diane, he just tugged at all of my heartstrings around my talk, and it made me realize that my sync method wasn't just for the talk. The sync method was for my work. So I kind of integrated it into a lot of these ideas. So simply put, for social media and digital media, S is for simple. Far too often in this space, everyone wants to be the smartest person in the room, right? People walk online and they're like, well, the dexterity of the photosynthesis of the duplicity of the, I'm like, whoa, guys. Like, how about just like, sun makes plants green? Like, can't we just do something like that? And what I would encourage people to do is the first step is just to simplify your message. It's okay to erase and edit down to really boil down a concentrated version of your message in order to reach people. One of the greatest compliments I've ever received in my life was from a lady named Chris Bradley. She does a podcast. She said, Robin, you just really know how to make things so simple and easy to understand. And I said, "Oh, that warms my heart, right?" However, we're in a space now, Diane, I believe that sometimes easy, sometimes simple, sometimes basic gets a negative connotation. It's like if it's not overcomplicated and if it's not 18 pages, there's not value there. When in fact, on social, because of the speed of social, simple just works. Why is for yield to your intentions. So, yielding to your intentions is really like taking a minute before you publish anything, create something, uh, create a strategy or plan, and think about what kind of results are we trying to get for the people we serve. Far too often, people are like selling things. And if you sell things, that's great. But like most people don't want to be sold to, they just want to find a way to improve their life or get value from something. So if we start with the intention before we go into just pumping out content like we're checking off a list on our to-do list, or checking off a box on our to-do list, then we can create that stronger connection with folks online. N is for natural. Online, people show up the way they believe they have to show up. A CEO for a really big, company might have to go online with corporate speak. However, I would encourage folks to start to communicate with people like they communicate with their best friends, especially if you're trying to build a personal brand online. It's really helpful to not talk to people like you're in the conference room because, to be quite honest, in real life, we don't talk like that. That's not how we talk to the people we care about and love. And I believe whatever the business is, especially if it's like service and you're like trying to improve people's lives, if you connect with them on a human level, it will cut through that noise that we talked about earlier. And the last step is C, change it up. People are on a hamster wheel treadmill at top speed right now with social, especially with the rise of AI. We're able to put out content faster than we've ever been able to put it out, where we can research faster, we can write scripts faster. And what's happening is we have a noisy pit of sludge just kind of all over our feeds right now. So if you feel like that's happening, it's okay for you to zig when other people are zagging, to go the other way, try something else. If you've always done video content because you have a podcast and you're cutting up those clips, maybe try to repurpose some of that into written content. If you've only done short tweets on X and Twitter, maybe it's time for you to test out some video content. Change up the mediums, change up the messaging. Also, if you have adjacent topics associated with your business or niche, maybe try topics that are a layer or two above or below what you normally talk about to see if you can reach new people. And that's a quick and dirty breakdown of the sync method.
No, I think that's great. And I mean that the underlying thread that I'm hearing through that method is be human. So if you wouldn't do it when you're in a room with someone, if that's not the way you would say things or explain something, then are you putting on a show for someone by creating this, massive long version of War and Peace to explain something that could really be the Cliff Note version, which is what we're all looking for because we don't have much patience.
Or time, right? We're like
Right. And
yeah.
there's so much demand for our attention from everywhere. So but how do you one interesting thing that I think has been an ongoing debate in social, and obviously it depends on the platform, but is how personal do you get? So like if you're forming an actual relationship with someone, let's say you and I are talking, we're going to talk a little bit about our past and how we got to where we are today. And so, we're legitimately going to do that, but there might be a line that we would draw in terms of how personal that we get because it's a business relationship. But then sometimes you see people getting really personal on social, and it kind of depends on the platform, obviously. But what's your take on, how do you, and let's assume that everyone listening is a professional, right? So we're looking at building a professional audience. Where do you balance the personal versus professional versus educational content? Like, how do you put all that together so it makes sense for a professional brand?
That is a phenomenal question. So like this is a good
I
one.
will
And
let you go.
I could talk about this one because this is so layered and it's deep. So I'll start with the fact that it's all case sensitive, right? So every person, every job, right? I might be an influencer for a job. It might be all good for me to talk about my avocado toast, right? I might be a CEO. It might not be good for me to talk about the argument that I had with my wife this past weekend, right? So I think that it really depends on the person. It's case sensitive, but I think generally speaking, this is what I teach and I talk about. I would do a self assessment. I think self awareness online is something that is not even a conversation in most spaces. You might see a LinkedIn article here or there, but like generally speaking, on the bigger platforms like the Instagrams and the TikToks of the world, Facebook, people are not deep diving into self-awareness specifically around social media marketing or social media content creation. So the first step would be to do a self-awareness check, to do like a self-audit. Okay, if I'm going into this venture of, let's say I'm a CEO of a small business and I want to create a personal brand that supports my business, the first thing I would ask myself is, what am I comfortable sharing? There's always this, not always, but oftentimes I see the LinkedIn cringe videos. I don't know if you've ever seen these. There's a whole like genre of content, especially on YouTube and TikTok, where people are kind of poking fun at LinkedIn cringe content. For example, you have a person who just got married and they'll post a picture of their wedding and they'll put the picture up like, oh, this past Sunday, me and my wife, we tied the knot after so many years. I love her so much, so grateful. What it reminds me of about my business is that when you meet someone, like, yo, did you just do that? That is such what? Talk about a segue, right? So there's this whole, it's hilarious. And I get it, right? But the point is that maybe that's too far for you. But I would say if you want to create content that somehow aligns your business with your wedding, who am I to judge? If I don't like it, I don't have to watch it. Now, what I would say is that self-awareness audit will be the the key indicator on how far you should go. So I know how far I'll go. I talk the way I talk to my coworkers. I'll go that far when I'm in the professional sphere. Um, as far as the way I'll talk to my clients, I'll go that far online. The way I talk with my family, I won't go that far, right? But some of the lessons that I have as a parent and as a husband, I might bring in, but I'm just really sensitive on how I do it. And it also depends on what platform and brand you're representing. So for me, I have a fantasy NBA sports channel that I've been growing for the last 5 years. And the way I show up there is a little different because the audience is different. So you want to be mindful. Like you don't want to come in, doing, Disney content about you and your kids watching Disney films if you're talking to C-suite professionals. So I think self-awareness would be the number one tip that I would recommend.
And I think that's great advice. And so it's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day who is a business owner, and they were just sharing, they've been trying to do a lot of work on their personal brand. And they were sharing their experience specifically about LinkedIn. And this person has been posting kind of a combination of, life lessons content that's not at all tied to business, still very appropriate, but life lessons, and then content that is, here's some advice about their particular specialty. And just looking at the stats, this person was basically saying that, I get no engagement on any of the, what I'm thinking is the thought leadership content. And I get all sorts of engagement on all of the personal life lessons content, but yet this person is not a coach. So, they're actually trying to sell the business. Where's that kind of balance between personal and professional in your opinion?
Yeah, I'll share a quick story that connects to this. So there was a time in 2020 when I had first um, dived deep into TikTok. I typically like as platforms come out, I give them time before I really like dig in and try to understand and win on them. And TikTok was one that I was kind of putting off. And then in 2020, I tried and we had a couple of videos go super viral. Both videos did over 2 million views, generated a bunch of followers, all of this good stuff. And maybe like your friend or the person you have worked with, it's a signal like something's right here, right? So I'll do more of that. So I did more of that content. They still perform well, not quite as viral, but very well. And one thing that happened is that I realized years later that no genuine connections were built from that. No business relationships, no clients, like not even someone that I can say, hey, I met them through that thing. On the other side of the spectrum, a few years later, I released a framework video. I'm all about my frameworks, right? And I talked about one of my frameworks called Fitty, Fity. Really, it's about how to repurpose content in that particular time period. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube those were the platforms that I was talking about in the video. About 250 something views. I get a DM a couple of days after the post drops. Somebody is like, "Oh my goodness, can you tell me more about that framework? How can I work with you?" That relationship generated tons of revenue from my business. So we talk about vanity metrics, we talk about what works, right? And really, if you're not creating things that are gonna be magnetic to the people you wanna serve, then you're just getting caught up in the vanity metrics. So although like a post that maybe is not something you typically talk about does well, I would continue to do the other stuff as well. And if you want to get the results, the vanity metrics results, you can continue to do the both. But I wouldn't lose sight on who you're trying to serve. I feel what happened with me in that 2020 time period is I saw that happening. I was like, well, if I can get millions of views doing this, I'll just do this, when in fact, I wasn't reaching the people that I really wanted to reach.
That's interesting. I was at a conference and I was listening to a YouTube influencer, and she was saying something very similar to what you're saying. Is if you create sticky content that serves your audience, you're casting the net more broadly so that then when you do put out maybe those less frequent posts that definitely are not selling, folks, we don't want to sell on social media, but are more kind of educating perhaps about what you do, now the audience is going to see them as wider because you've cast that net. So it sounds like that's the strategy that you're suggesting.
Yes. In that case, yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, social media obviously is great, and we love, we love connecting, and we do love our metrics, and we do want to try to get to DMing people, and then ultimately, because it's human, we want to try to get them off of the platform and have a real conversation. And you've talked about using sensory cues like scent or touch in virtual and live presentations to foster deeper engagement. Talk to me more about that.
Yep. So I find that, anything physical, right? Whether it's, touch, whether it's, taste, sound, these kind of things that kind of can trigger something physically. When we're online, it's almost like we believe that it's kind of disappearing. And I find that those those pathways for us to bring those online virtual relationships and bring them into reality in real life settings will lead to those sensory explosions kind of like happening in real time. For example, I have a, a digital friend, right? His name is Nino. When my brother passed away a few years ago, I was responsible for his affairs. So not only was I like trying to mourn for my brother, I was like trying to pay for his funeral, right? Which was super expensive. And I was like, where am I going to get this money from? I can't pull it out of my savings. Like, I need to like raise some money. So I do a post and just say like, hey, if anyone wants to raise money. This guy, Nino, Diane, I never met this guy, right? Never met this guy in real life, only online. He reached out to me and said, hey, take this. It's going to be worth about $5,000. He gave me a piece of Ethereum crypto. I'm not a crypto guy. So I was like, what? Well, okay. So even though like it wasn't an in-person like touch handshake, he gave me something that was very tangible, right? A digital coin that essentially covered the cost of my brother's funeral. How did we build that relationship? I never asked him for one thing ever. All I was doing was pouring into him, creating community spaces where we can talk about the things that he was working on, and we just stayed in contact. So I believe that like you said at the start, the way to kind of get our impact to exist in a human in-person space is to just be genuine upfront online, and it'll lead there, even if it doesn't mean we're in the room physically, because we can still connect through different sensory mechanisms.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. And we talked a little bit earlier, obviously, we are in the age of AI, and there is a plethora of content, which really kind of brings to mind the old expression, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But obviously you can automate. I think one of your quotes was you can automate content, but you can't automate connection. So how do you integrate AI in your brand work without losing the human touch? Because we all want to be more efficient, but now, we're saying we have to build these genuine connections as well. So how do we do that?
Mm. First of all, thank you so much for pulling up one of my quotes. I love that. I love that. I just appreciate the attention to detail. So how can we do that in real time now? So here's the thing about AI. I am often perceived, because of some of my opinions and ideas around this, that I'm like anti-AI. I'm not anti-AI. I use AI every day. So how can we use it but still maintain like our humanity and human connection? For me, I think it's about not trusting the robots to do everything for you. I would really encourage people who are leveraging AI to make sure that you are reviewing everything carefully. And like we said earlier, Diane, if it sounds, if it doesn't sound like something you would say in a conversation, then that's what I would change or remove. Now, here's my hack. This is my hack. So what I typically do is I do a lot of audio voice use of artificial intelligence. For example, the platform that I love the most right now is Perplexity. I was using ChatGPT for a while, but Perplexity is like my baby. Like I love Perplexity. So I'll get in the car, Diane, and if I'm gonna work on whether it's a plan for a client, a plan for myself, or if I just want to brainstorm, I'll turn on the voice function and I'll just kick it. I'll just like, hey, do me a favor, like create this, create that. Now, when I'm creating scripts or content, I'll give specific instructions. Hey, do me a favor. I'm about to narrate something. Please don't stop me. Don't stop until I say I'm done. And when you capture it in this voice and only change grammar and corrections for spelling, and then it'll kind of spit out my stuff to me. So I'm using it for enhancement, not so much creation. And I think that's a tool that has helped me to remain rooted in my human touch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard other people reference that type of a prompt as well when they're using whichever, choose your LLM. But when you're interacting it with voice, that if you, because sometimes we'll pause and it thinks you're done, but you're just thinking. So like don't stop until I tell you I'm done. I think is a really key thing to direct it to do and to help with. And I think you're also hitting on something that honestly today I think is an underused element of AI, and that is using it as a guide, like having a conversation with it, an actual verbal conversation, the way that you would with a human. And then human in the loop is another thing that comes to mind with your description, because that's one thing that, like, there's a lot of things that AI, and we're not quite at the age of agentic AI. We're very, very close. But it's a little risky to go and just there's a lot of platforms out there where you can get AI to just generate a bunch of social media content and spit it out. But again, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I love that.
Does that reflect your voice? So, and so what was it? Repeat what you said about making sure that it's going to retain your unique voice and your
Yes.
resonance.
Yeah, I usually, especially when I'm creating content using I usually instruct it, usually with verbal prompts. I don't really type that much on it these days. I'll tell it, make sure that you capture my voice and limit your changes to just grammar and corrections and
Mm.
spelling corrections, stuff like that. So that way, it's almost like it's reciting it, and then when I get it, I might ask it for some enhancements. Hey, can you give me a better start for this sentence? Is there a way we can close this? Give me 5 options for ending this sentence or something like that. So again, it's fun to play around with, honestly, and I think it's going to increase our output. It's going to make the world noisier. I get it. But just like when the internet, came in the 90s, folks were resistant. People
Mhm.
were like, I'm never going to do that. And now we all have to do that. So I have, people online in some of the spaces where I hang out that have stopped following me and supporting me for some of my views, which is okay. And that might happen, but you got to just figure out what's best for you, what's best for your business, and what's best for your mission. And if you do that, it'll all work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like if somebody unsubscribes from your email list, like, great.
Yeah.
Well,
You
now
weren't supposed to be
I don't
there.
have to pay for you and my license, and you're not gonna,
Cut some
I'm
costs.
not wasting my message on you anymore.
I love that.
So, how do you guide leaders and creators to shift their focus from reach, which we've all been trained on, to real impact?
Yeah. It's hard. Again, like I said a couple minutes ago, a lot of my philosophies around this stuff it conflicts. It conflicts with what people are saying. So I don't want to discount impressions, reach, our traditional metrics that we have on platforms, right? Watch time, all of the things are important. However, especially for new people to social media or people who have not been investing a lot of resources, energy, time, space, bandwidth into this platform, I would encourage you to deprioritize those traditional metrics and focus on real human connection as a metric. Now, I won't go into detail on what to look for, but I will give a couple of examples. One example that I see that's super valuable is one that I talked about earlier, which is a unsolicited DM. So not like if you do a lead magnet post on LinkedIn, hey, send me a DM that says a one pager if you want this thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you just throwing something out there to the world, a piece of content to influence or impact people, and then you get an unsolicited DM. Even if the DM is, you know, even if it's like, hey, I really like that last post you did, just wanted to tell you to keep going. Even if that is if the message is that simple, I think that's worth noting somewhere. Like, hey, this thing that we put out there created that kind of response. Because in my opinion, that type of metric is 10 times more valuable than 1,000 impressions, 2,000 impressions, because those impressions might have been generated by a bot. There are bot farms like all over the world where they have machines like swiping and tapping, right? So like, although there's nothing wrong with having a lot of views or reach, I'm not saying that, and there is value there. However, especially for companies just starting out on social, I don't want you to get discouraged when you see your post has 200 views on it, because if 200 people came to your storefront right now or requested one-on-one calls with you, you would be probably overwhelmed unless you had the infrastructure to serve them. So I would just challenge and encourage people to change their perspective when it comes to those metrics.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, I know we're talking about social today, but we're seeing an overall shift in marketing toward KPIs that are more engagement focused than volume focused. Even, we're seeing that, getting indications that the Google algorithm is favoring how long people spend on your website and how deeply they scroll and, how many pages that they view, which is all about engagement. So it's really the same thing that we're looking. I think the algorithms are also shifting to value that human interaction. So, with that in mind, how do you grow your audience? What are your recommendations to try to get increased visibility? And I know it varies by platform, but what are some thoughts that you could share?
Yep. So I think having a carousel of CTAs, I think what I see a lot, people have like kind of their go-to CTA where it's like,
Those
hit
are
the link in
called,
the bio.
by the way, we'll throw out a definition. That's what
Oh
Mark.
yeah, they have their call to actions, right? They might have one or two that they really lean into. And what I would encourage is to just have a larger carousel of those and just to kind of get people to take different actions that would lead them to eventually subscribing, following, or signing up for your mailing list, whatever platform you're really trying to grow. One platform that I see this really working well on is Substack.
Mm.
So if folks don't know, Substack it's been around for a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, but it really started out as a newsletter platform, very similar to a Mail Kit or Beehive, one of these kind of email service providers, or Medium. It really looks more like Medium, where you write articles and you build a list. But they introduced their social media application within their ecosystem called Notes about, I want to say, a year and a half, 2 years ago. But they updated their algorithm last year and it's bonkers over there, Diane. It's like, it looks like, it looks like early days Twitter over there. Like people are engaged, happy, like the vibe is really positive, and businesses are starting up over there. Businesses are starting newsletters just on Substack. And the beautiful thing about that is that you get the best of both worlds, where you can build an audience on a platform with an existing, fan base, or existing user base, I should say, but also you can easily move those people over to email, which,
Mm.
as you
Yeah.
know, Diane, like we can hang out on
Oh,
these.
that's what you own.
Exactly. You can hang out on social media all you want to, but if they pull the plug or they sell TikTok, there could be, your entire audience disappearing with the snap of a finger. Where with your email, you own that audience. So Substack, if folks are not on Substack, I would at least poke around a little bit, because there's a great opportunity there right now, especially.
And Reddit as well, because it's genuine. I think, what you're speaking to, it's very interesting. So you're talking to, like whether it's Reddit or whether it's Substack, like a really vibrant, engaged audience, humans actually connecting, less controlled by the algorithm, real interactions, which is everything that you're standing for in your methodology. So we're starting, and maybe that's a little bit of the backlash that we're seeing from people that don't want to deal with all the AI generated content. Because if you try that on Substack or Reddit, I mean, the community is going to jump all over you. So it has to be genuine. It can't sound like selling. It really is about relationships over there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Reddit, while we're talking Reddit, especially from a paid media perspective, if you're like investing ad dollars, there's a lot of opportunity on Reddit right now. Yeah, so if you have an ad budget and you're doing Meta ads or you're doing, YouTube and Google ads, you might want to in 2026 carve out a little bit of space for some Reddit ads. I think they have a pretty cool promotion right now. I think they're like giving extra money if you're doing your first ad, because though that audience on Reddit, they're not on the other platforms. I think it's like 65% of Reddit users don't use other social media platforms. So you
Yeah.
have like this blue ocean of potential, partners and clients. So I would strongly recommend testing out some Reddit ads too.
Tremendous opportunity, and little chat GPT hack as well, that if you're trying to assess, let's say, audience sentiment, or how they feel about a competitor, how they feel about your industry, just go ask chat GPT to go check Reddit and summarize the sentiment for you. So it saves you a ton of time, and it's super powerful. So
That is
great
Yes,
research device.
that is a great tip. I love that one.
So, Robin, you've done a lot. I love your message. I love what you stand for. What's the legacy that you hope that your new book, Social Media Sync, and your TEDx talk will leave for future entrepreneurs and leaders?
Yep. I guess for legacy, I'd like for people to read the book and understand that no matter where they are in their journey, that they have an opportunity to create limitless reach to touch people all over this world with their message. Even the thing about me is like I meet so many folks, especially in the nonprofit sector. A lot of my work is with nonprofit leaders, is that we get limited to our area or our state or even our country. There might be someone in Brussels that if they knew about the thing that you do would somehow want to partner with you, support you, donate, whatever that relationship is. So I would strongly encourage you to use the book, use the talk to forge out intentional human connections and at the end of the day, serve more people and hopefully change more lives.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, how can people find the book, and how can they reach you if they want to connect?
The easiest way to find the book as well as to connect with me is to accept a free gift that I brought for your audience.
Love it.
So what I did was I created something called the Social Media Sync Bundle. Basically, it includes two free ebooks, I should say, uh, both social media based, as well as a ready to use checklist that you can put into practice right now. And I'm also going to throw in a free preview of my book, which would include the foreword, the introduction, as well as the first chapter, all for you. All you have to do is visit landthetalk.com. That would also put you on my mailing list. You respond to me via email and you have direct contact with me. I respond to all of my emails myself. No AI quite yet.
Wonderful. And we'll definitely put that link in the show notes. And on socials, what's your favorite platform for people to reach you, and what's your handle?
Yeah, I'm on all platforms, so you could just search at Robin Marks. That's ROBBINMARX. That's me on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, the works. So you can find me at Robin Marks.
Wonderful. Robin, it's truly been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you so much. And Diane, thanks for sharing your platform and also sharing a little bit of your light with me today.
Wonderful. Thanks.